Dear scholars, students, and professors and colleagues, I am very honored to have been invited by Dr. Santulan Mahanta, who has been my student, to deliver a lecture under the Guru Bani series. I don't consider myself to be a theorist. I do not consider myself to be a scholar, but simply a teacher, a facilitator. I have taught for 50 years. I started my teaching career in 1971. So in 2021, I shall be completing 50 years of teaching. I also did my PhD on contemporary Indian English poetry. Now, as a teacher, I believe that a teacher should be neutral in his discourse on any subject, and he should not impose his personal ideology on the subject. Similarly, he should give, as a teacher, a rounded picture of the subject he is speaking on. Now, in narratology, we have a term called master plot. Master plot means the universal pattern. And this universal pattern is true of all countries, all times, all ages. You put in individual names and you have a novel. So we have a master plot called the eternal triangle. Now this master plot refers to the situation, to a stock situation in which two men are in love with the same woman, or two women are in love with the same man. Now in literature, this master plot has been taken up with different resolutions, different denouements, as in The Guide, as in George Bernard Shaw Candida. It's a very popular master plot. But it is a state of conflict. Now, in the last quarter of the 20th century, we had this eternal triangle in literary theory. Mr. Pomo and Mr. Poco. They are in love with Miss Femi. Now, this should be a situation of conflict. But unlike the traditional eternal triangle, this eternal triangle in literary theory was one of harmonious relationship, because all the three had a common minimum agenda. So they did not contradict each other. Mr. Poco did not fight with Mr. Pomo, and Miss Fanny encouraged them both. Now, this eternal triangle of Mr. Pomo, Mr. Poco, and Miss Femi, in a combined manner, effected a major paradigm shift, because all of them, all the three, had a flair for the officially erased, marginalized, and low people. Now, this was a major paradigm shift, and postmodernism and feminism supported post-colonialism. Because remember, post-colonialism without hyphen, I will discuss about it. Post-colonialism, the term post-colonialism or the term post-colonial without hyphen refers to a theory which speaks against economic disparity, inequality, exploitation, oppression. So, overtly, it may not have anything to do with the so-called colonization. I quoted Robert Young's definition in his book, Post-Colonialism, a very short introduction. And Robert Young does not put any hyphen. Without hyphen, post-colonialism is a theory. And that's why any literature which has the background of colonization or not will be called post-colonial literature. Dalit literature, for example, did not have external colonization by the British, but it was a victim of internal colonization by the high caste Hindus. And Dalit literature is truly a post-colonial literature. It's truly a post-colonial literature, and it is a literature of protest and emancipation. That is why it is said that post-colonialism is a discourse of the marginals, Africans, Indians, tribals, Dalits, Aboriginals, queer people, not girl, criminals, or what Fanon calls the wretched of the earth. It is a seminal book, and Fanon is one of the founding fathers of post-colonialism. So Fanon's book is called The Wretched of the Earth. So post-colonialism speaks for the wretched of the earth and gives them a voice. But it is no longer a monolithic discourse. Because remember, the British, we have two kinds of colonies, the settler colony and the invader colony. The settler colonies include New Zealand, Canada, Australia, and invader colonies include India and Africa. But nowadays, I delivered a lecture on it, Australian post-colonialism, because colonialism affected Koreans of Australia, Maoris of New Zealand, First Peoples of Canada, and even Red Indians. Before that, before the British started their agenda of imperialism and colonialism, in 1170, the lordship of Ireland was transferred to England, and since then the relationship of Ireland and England has been one of the colonizer and the colonized. And that is why, as Fanon says, which is true of all the colonized countries, that we have the tripartite panorama on the wheel. In the beginning, the colonized is fascinated with the colonizer. In Australia, the Aborigines thought that these British people are white avatar of their ancestors. So in the beginning, there is fascination. Then later on, when see through the real game of the colonizer, there is uneasiness. And the last stage is cultural assertion. In Ireland, as you know, in 1890, we had a movement called Celtic Revival, where they revived Celtic identity, Celtic literature, that's why we say Irish dramatic movement, Irish literary renaissance, Irish literary revival, etc., etc. And with the advent of post-colonial theory, Irish writers are being reassessed in the light of the post-colonial theory. Then Australia was a settler colony, but remember, the white people who settled there administered the convicts, because Australia was developed as a penal colony. So the oppressed white men who were transported from England to Australia to serve their term did not identify with the British heritage, and they wanted their own identity. That's why in Australia we had Zindi Orovak movement, and Judith was a champion of this movement. She was a champion of separate Australian identity, and she made use of Aboriginal culture, etc., etc. So today, with the parameters of Fanon, Edward Said, Homi K. Bhabha, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, Mahatma Gandhi, and Googie, post-colonialism is no longer a monolithic discourse. It has different hues, different shades, and different meanings. That's why tricontinentalism is the term suggested by Robert Young. Anyway, that's a different question, because like other discourses, nothing is pure and simple. Now, I gave you the example of Australia and Ireland. So we now speak of Australian post-colonialism. They also rebelled against the white masters, what to say of Aborigines. And as I said that, as of today, to be truly post-colonial means to be concerned with those who were erased, those who were deprived, those who were marginalized. And Meenakshi Mukherjee says that post-colonialism is an emancipatory concept. It has emancipated people and empowered them. It has given a voice, and it has also resulted in what is called new humanities, not the humanities of the Renaissance times, Studia Humanitas Humanitatum. We have the new humanities under the shattering impact of post-colonialism. We have now women's studies, men's studies, queer studies, Dalit studies, and what is called oppression studies. Studies about those who have been oppressed by the colonial forces. So this is truly a new achievement. Post-colonialism is liberating. It gives voice to the devoiced. But remember, post-colonialism is rooted in what I call analepsis and prolepsis. Analepsis is a term from narratology. It means flashback. And you know, analepsis means flashback and prolepsis means flash forward. Post-colonialism addresses all the issues arising from colonization, and it also tackles problems of neo-colonialism. It talks of natives. It talks of the marginal. Now, that's why I wanted to share with it the process of colonization has stages. And we have proper critical terms for this. You will recall Sir Andrew Freeport, a member of the Spectator Club in addition. Sir Andrew Freeport, sorry, Sir Andrew Freeport represents the British ideology. We must extend the empire not through war, but through trade and commerce. The British came to India as trader. Then, in order to impress the natives that, look, we are here, we are interested in your culture, we are interested in your scriptures, they started translating Indian Sanskrit texts and other texts. But their real purpose was to loot the golden bird, the Indian wealth. That's why, because remember, as Margaret Atwood says, the idea of colony means the idea of loot. And from this angle, The Tempest is an allegory of colonialism. If you have read The Tempest, you will see how Prospero has knowledge and so he has power. That's why, I developed a kind of formula for students in which I would like to note it down so that when I explain, you understand. The first element in my formula is T cube. T raised to the power of 3. T cube means trader, translator, and thief. Colonial translation was also a means of domination and subjugation. And seminal work has been done by a scholar who in 1974 was a 13-year-old girl with a collection of poems, Liquid Sapphire. Her name is Tejaswini Niranjana. She has done work on this field and shows how translation was also a tool of domination and subjugation. So the opening term in my formula is T cube. The British came to India as trader. I am talking of the stages in the process of colonization, geographical colonization and civilizational colonization. T cube, trader, translator, and thief. Plus, the British are the white man, and there's a poem on it by Kipling, The White Man's Burden. So the second element in my formula is WMB. WMB means white man's burden. It was the holy duty of the British as civilized people to civilize the savages, to civilize Indians and Africans. This was their overt noble agenda. And that is why the next element in my formula is PS. PS means Prospero syndrome. Prospero wanted Caliban to learn a language. And for this, he himself did not don the role of a teacher. He requested Miranda, his daughter, that you teach him language. Because Prospero cannot go to every nook and corner of India and Africa. So he planted what is called surrogate Englishman. Surrogate Englishman means he imposed Western education. He imposed English studies. Shakespeare became a means of colonizing the mind of Indians and Africans. That's why the next item is SE. Plus, you see, this English studies was used as a mask of conquest. And there's a book on it, The Mask of Conquest by Gauri Vishwanathan. But this was not a noble agenda. Their real purpose was what is called the colonizer's gaze. They wanted the natives to feel inferior, and they wanted to sabotage or explode native literary traditions, native tongue, mother tongue. And Gughi has given a word for this. He uses the word cultural bomb. They use English studies, they use the English language as a cultural bomb. So Next formula is CV. Plus, because of the request of Prospero, Miranda tries to teach Caliban. And the classic rejoinder of Caliban to Miranda, you taught me language. Now my profit on it, I know how to abuse you. This is called CC, Caliban complex. And